Welcome to AI for UX. This is a space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations. And I'm John, the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology-driven product innovation firm. So I struggled to keep up with all the new AI tools for UX research, and I'm guessing I'm not alone, and that's why I started this series. In each installment, we're speaking to founders of some of the tools that researchers use and getting the inspiration and how it might benefit you. And just a quick note that these are not product endorsements. We always pay full price at Brilliant Experience for anything we use, and no one's getting paid. It's just for us to learn together. So with that, let me get started. I want to introduce our guest. So Basel Fakhoury is the co-founder and CEO of User Interviews, a tool that exists to help teams discover user insights through access to quality participants. So thanks so much for agreeing to do this. We're delighted to have you here.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. Excited to chat.
Yeah. And actually, this is a little different than some because often we've got tools that are specifically in the middle of the user research. And I think that this is one where it's complementary to that actual research we're doing. And so with that, I can just say, who's your target audience for user interviews and what pain point does it address?
Yeah, for sure. So we focus on the user part of user research. So getting participants into research studies. And when you think about participants, there's kind of an easy split between your existing customer base and non-customers. And we have two products, functionally one for each of those. One product is called Recruit. Recruit is a product to recruit participants for user research studies. We name the company User Interviews. We name this product Recruit. We're kind of literal when we name things. So that product, we have millions of participants who have joined our network, and then a set of automations that gets the right participant in the right study. So we're able to find niche participants very fast that are who you need to talk to when you're doing research. Our second product is when companies are doing research with their own customer base. So what we did is all of the automations we had built, the scheduling, screening, incentives, communication, we now let our customers use with their customers. And then on the back end, we built a place for them to upload their customers either through a CSV, an API, or different opt-in links, segment them however they want, and then build out different guardrails to make sure that they are being compliant, they're not emailing the participants too much. So very much both helps the researcher experience as well as protecting the participants. So those are our two products, Recruit and Research Hub. And then I believe the second question was who are we selling to
Yeah,
and who are the
exactly
users?
right. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so we think they're pretty broadly applicable. We see a lot of different use cases, all sorts of research and all sorts of methodologies need users. It's kind of the primary input into user research. But who we find, so you can kind of think of it as concentric circles. The core people who are using it every week, as one of the core parts of their job would be a research operations manager, director, or a user researcher themselves. And then kind of the next layer out as a product designer or product manager who's doing research at some cadence, but not every single day. So we think it's broadly applicable across company sizes and across industries, although we do see, a little bit more user research investment in tech companies.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is interesting. And cool. I guess one question I had was just, there are some options in the space. I wondered what makes user interviews sort of unique or potentially better than others.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we're the first company that's really approached the recruitment side from a technology and data perspective. And what that's done is it's allowed us to kind of build up this big audience and to use the tech and data to then go make the outcomes better. What that really means is we're able to find niche users that other companies can't find. We're able to find them very fast. Our median time across all of our projects is under 2 hours to find a number of people you look for. And we do it with a very low fraud rate. So that ability to find niche users very fast of high quality participants is really what differentiates us. And that is all driven by the matching algorithm and fraud detection algorithms that we've built on the back end that, I'm sure we'll get into this later. We do think currently we've been releasing ways to make sure that they are powered by AI that is increasing the response rates we get from participants, the participant retention, and all of the parts of that flywheel.
Yeah. So, I mean, in full disclosure, we've been using user interviews and honestly other tools too, but we have had really good luck with pretty, I was going to say odd, but that's not exceptional users that we needed, like B2B folks, for example. Maybe you can give us a sense, this is AI for UX. How do you use technology to do this sort of matching? It's an interesting problem.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing, differentiator on the Research Hub side is we do think we're kind of one of the first companies to build in that category. And we think having
Yeah.
one place where you can handle all of your recruitment, talk to all of your users is really a differentiator. And we're the only people that handle both the external and internal recruitment. Yeah, so the technology, on the back end, one of our product managers actually just released a blog post on how this works. But, one way to think about it at a very high level is that every time a participant applies to a research study and doesn't get selected, they have a high chance of not applying to the next study or, kind of churning out of your audience. So I think what we do better than anyone else is use all of the data we have on those participants to send them studies that they're likelier to qualify for. And we do that at scale based off hundreds of millions of data points. And that algorithm gets better over time. And what that does is it just makes us have a more active audience, a broader audience over time. And then, like I said, there's that other algorithm on top of it that's doing the same thing to detect fraud. So looking at, tens of millions, hundred of million of data points to say, hey, this person is not who they're saying they are. And the combination of those is really what differentiates us. And part of that matching is now powered by language models to say, hey, if someone answered in one way, that means they're more likely to answer in a different way for the next study they're applying for.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, we've had pretty good luck with recruiting either custom recruits or with tools like yours in not having to worry very often about fraud, suggesting that you're doing a really good job. I guess we always try to ask questions that maybe only are like when we're working with very specific biologists, they have to do RNA-seq, for example. So do people understand what that is or know its value in comparison to other, single-strand technologies and so on. So what can you just get? I don't think I've really thought very hard about how folks are detected as fraud. And I'm not saying that I want to learn how to be fraudulent on your platform, but more if you can give me a general sense of what kinds of things go into that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you had a great experience. I think the way we've chosen to use it and the way we've chosen on be our differentiator on that recruit side is a lot behind the scenes, right? So, but it shows up over time and it shows up in the ability to find these participants and make sure that they're high quality. So, whereas a lot of companies have implemented AI really front and center as part of the UX, you see it, you feel it every day. Ours is actually like powering this algorithm in the back, so you might not even notice it's happening, but it is causing better experiences. Yeah, on the fraud detection, look, we have a ton of data points. There's basic things like, IP address matching, where you say you are. There's, how often who referred you. There's how are you, are you changing answers over time and characteristics over time? So, there's just a ton of data points. And the good thing about us is we have all this data we've been doing this for, almost a decade at this point. So we have a lot of data on participants and our researchers have the ability to rate and flag participants. So we have that input that's just making the model get better over time. And the other kind of advantage we have is most of our research is qualitative, often moderated research. So it's much easier to be fraudulent on a survey than it is to be in a 30-minute interview. So we think we have a better feedback cycle as well to let us know. So yeah, we estimate less than 1% of the sessions on the platform are fraudulent right now, which I think is best in class.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, I guess we have met folks who either have their own pool, so they typically use that and rarely sort of go outside their pool, or have gotten used to using custom recruits each time. And so just for people that aren't, or maybe they're new to UX research. So if I haven't used a tool like yours, how should I think about approaching research and sort of work differently if I have your tool at my disposal?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to speed, right? So, when we first started the company, we realized there was a lot of latent demand for research. A lot of product teams wanted to do more research, but they weren't able to. One, because sometimes they weren't able to find the people, but more likely they just weren't able to find it fast enough. It wasn't able to fit into that product cycle. So, I think when you have a tool like ours that can find participants in hours, either from your own audience, either from your own customer base or from our recruit panel. You can imagine building research into more processes and being able to help it influence decisions fast enough, right? Because if
Mm-hmm.
you have to make a decision in a week, you're usually not going to delay the decision. More likely than not, you will make a suboptimal decision or a decision with suboptimal data than you will delay the decision. So what we try to do is just make sure we can do it as fast as possible so you can get that research done fast enough.
Got it. Yeah. It is impressive. I guess the other thing to know is that sometimes user interviews is sort of baked into some of the research tools. So I guess um, ca- I actually probably don't know them all. Can you give me an example of what that's like or the
Yeah,
experience you might
this is
have?
a new a new thing we're beginning to
Mm-hmm.
do here. We found that especially with all of these new AI tools, they are building really hard technology to allow for this AI moderation. I know you've interviewed a number of them, but and that's really hard. They have limited resources. They don't want to go build an audience, and it makes no sense for them to do. That's a different problem. That's also very hard
Mm-hmm.
that we do. But
Right.
that being said, the end user needs both, right? They need the tool and they need the participants. So we've been partnering with a number of these tools now to help, um, provide the participants for their users while they're doing research. So we release an API where they can kind of embed user interviews into their existing workflows. The most recent launch, I think, is with a company that you have recently interviewed, Outset, but I think a couple of the other ones are coming down the
Mm-hmm.
pipe as well.
Got it. And actually, the other thing to mention is again, like I'm familiar with how it feels, but for others, just what's the sort of experience that I get? I know we're not going to necessarily do a demo, but that I kind of how do I ask for the kinds of participants I want, and do I get a chance to review them and so on? What's that sort of experience like?
Yeah, we really think of ourselves as a software company, right? So there's a self-serve platform. You just go online. We basically walk you through a couple questions. So things like how many participants do you want? What's the methodology? What's your deadline or your schedule? And then, the most important thing is who do you want to talk to? So we have about, a couple dozen fixed characteristics on everybody. So these are things like job title, age, et cetera, that you can narrow down. But what I think really makes us flexible is we have a wide open screener survey where our clients can go and ask any question
Mm-hmm.
they want with qualification criteria to narrow down on who they want. We will then, so clients go, they launch that project with all of that information they've put in. It usually takes them, 5-10 minutes to launch it. We will then go send out that screener survey to people we think are likely to qualify within our audience using all of the data we have and the matching algorithm that I talked about previously. They'll fill out the screener. You'll usually get the number, like I said, our median time is people will start applying and you'll get them in under 2 hours. So you'll be able to see a list of everyone that responded to the study, who qualified. You'll then approve the ones you want to talk to. So sometimes someone qualifies, but you still want to go review their LinkedIn profile or review kind of open-ended answers, and we allow for that. Once you approve the participants, we handle all of the scheduling. We'll send them the link to get onto the study. You will use another tool to conduct the study, right? So it might be Zoom for a conversation, or it might be one of the many kind of like usability tools or survey tools, et cetera, whatever tool you want. And then you mark them as complete, and we send out the incentive and kind of wrap up the study for you. So kind of automate all of those manual tasks. Around getting a participant into the study.
And just um, yeah, fair enough. Whatever I was going was, if people are trying to get started with you, do they typically, can I do sort of a one-off with user interviews, or is it, we typically have done sort of longer contracts with you, so didn't know if
Yeah,
that's
so
possible.
we offer both. Like we have the ability to launch we call it pay as you go, so you just pay per project. A lot of people start that way with us just because, it's easy to say we can find you 20 SMB owners who do XYZ, but you want to actually feel the magic moment, right, for you is you launch a project and then it's like, oh wow, there's all these people that I'd love to talk to that I just, did not think I had this opportunity as they show up in the platform. So we do have this kind of project-based ability for people who, one, want to test out the product, or two, they're just not doing research as regularly, right? It's kind of a one-off for
Mhm.
them. But then, kind of economies of scale. If it looks like you're going to be doing research consistently, we can put you on kind of a longer contract where you're buying a number up front at a discounted rate.
Right.
And
Um,
it's cool,
yes.
for kind of launching that pay as you go. You can just go on the website, userinterviews.com. There's a big button there. You can press to start recruiting, and you can just kind of go through it. It should and we have an amazing kind of project coordinator team or operations team that's there making sure everything goes smoothly behind the scenes.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Do you partner? So if there's something that is really rare, so like when I've had to work with like neurosurgeons, for example, and it's just you
Hmm.
can't just find them.
Hmm.
Um, do, do you have any sort of custom recruiting arm or not? And both are
Yeah, that's
perfectly fine
actually a
answers.
new
Just
thing.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new thing we're actually talking about now. We're calling it premium recruiting. So yeah, for that is new. Historically, it's all been, from our audience, but there's a new thing we're kind of discussing where, hey, if it's something not in our audience, but it's important for you, we might be able to go and, do the advertising or do the extra kind of recruitment to find those people for you. So it is a new thing we're trying out now.
And just sort of take a step back as a researcher or like product discovery kind of person,
Mhm.
the combination of tools like yours, Basil, and these automated moderation tools are
Mhm.
really allowing us. So I said that on average our studies took about 35 days, historically, if it was a more complicated one and international and so on. And we're
Mhm.
we're turning things around now in a week. So it's really
Amazing.
remarkable how things have changed in a year
Yeah.
essentially. So
Yeah, an analogy I used to use with research, when I think about like this latent demand of research is like imagine if like your data science team, so not your user research team, but your data science team had to, go to an outside vendor to get the data set and it would, wait a couple weeks and, they basically couldn't do any analysis, within a month, right? It would take 30 days, 40 days to do it. Um, that would really change the way companies use data, right? It would be very
yeah.
project based. They wouldn't be data driven. They couldn't build it into their decision making. And I think user research, before us and our peers and the other tools in the space, was kind of in that world, right? Where
Hmm.
you often had to
Yeah.
go, you didn't have access with any sense of speed, right? And I think um, by bringing down the friction, both the amount of hours you need to put in as well as just the amount of time it takes to find the people. It really allows people to do more research and to have a higher percent of their decisions informed by user research.
It's actually, I don't know if I've ever asked you this question. So if when you look at the statistics of your users, so the teams that are engaging your system, I think that I'm trying to remember if you know how long the interviews are that people are taking, but where I was headed was logically you could start by saying we need to do this big bang research because it takes so long to recruit, and later it's like, oh, this group wants 10 people real quick for just 20 minutes for this one core question, and start to
Mhm.
cycle more. So I just didn't know if there's an evolution in time with your average customer of how they approach research with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head exactly that, but what I think we do definitely see is, um, on average, like an increase in research being completed the more they use us. Like companies increase their cadences over time or, do more research over time, which, um, I think is maybe pointing in that direction.
Hmm. Well, I did want to take a sort of step back too and just say, so thank you for describing sort of the product and how people
Uh-huh.
typically use it, including us. And I guess I did want to ask. It takes out so much work to make a system like this from scratch and to continue to foster it and so on. So, what just made you want to create this product for this field and give you that? What gave you that energy?
Yeah. So I'll try to shorten the origin story, but me and my co-founders took the scenic route, is what I say. So we actually started a different business. That was a bad idea. It was a mobile app for hotel services, so you could order room service, etc., through an app on your phone. We kind of grinded away on that for a while and just weren't getting the traction we wanted. And eventually we learned about user research. Initially, we came up with the idea without doing any user research, even though it seemed so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
We came up with the idea we were like, mobile phones are big, mobile's big, and hotels are big. You smash them together. That's how you come up with a big company. So once we learned about user research, we started trying to talk to all the travelers we knew. Eventually, our kind of growth hack or kind of research hack was we would buy refundable JetBlue tickets, go into the airport, go past security, call JetBlue, refund the ticket so we could get our money back. But now we were, past security, so we would go and kind of ask people at the gate to give us feedback on this app. So that's how we were kind of initially doing our research. Eventually, we found that, look, like there's a core value problem with that product. No one says ordering room service is a major pain point when they're traveling. Um, it's not going to get fixed by like some feature upgrades or different UX. So we're like, okay, we functionally needed to pivot. So we spent this summer, a few months, really thinking through a bunch of different ideas, initially within the travel space, but then broader
Mm-hmm.
and broader. And all of those ideas, we were running experiments, but we were also doing a lot of user research. Through that process, we ended
Hmm.
up becoming pretty passionate about user research. We saw the value there. We were reading and trying to train ourselves on it. And we also found that finding people was really hard, right? Like how are companies finding their participants? Um, and then we kind of had the aha moment, like, oh, maybe that is the business. Like we understand the value of research. We're passionate about it. And we know this is a big pain point. So we went and, I call it meta research, right? We were doing research about
Mm-hmm.
research
Yeah.
with user researchers and product teams. And functionally, what we found was two things. One, which I've already talked about, is there's this kind of latent demand. Everyone wanted to do more research. And then two, the biggest pain point was always recruitment. Everyone said recruitment was a big pain point. And that's when we were kind of like, oh, maybe there's something here. And then we started iterating and finding that we could be better than the status quo and started getting customers right away and then have been growing it ever since.
Cool. Um, and as it's been evolving, is there any milestones or things that you were able to solve that you're particularly proud of? That hey, we finally made it to make this work just the way we wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it less as like a giant, like these giant single moments, but more of just
Mm-hmm.
this iterative process over time. And this is things like, being able to find niche B2B participants, right? When we first started, it was just B2C. Um, I think the exciting things when you're growing a company are one, like the team, right? Like, you're really excited to bring someone on and they agree to join your company, or the relationships you build with your team. And then also the clients, right? Like just having um, so many innovative customers and, large companies, small companies, brands, agencies, but kind of all these people that are really trying to build great user-centric products using us. I feel like given what our product is, in some ways we kind of have this multiplier effect where we're selling to one team, but then they're building a product for millions or tens of millions of people that we have a small little effect on, and that's cool to feel.
One thing I guess I wanted to ask you too is just you are seeing all these groups like agencies, large groups, small groups, and so on. And we've had such an influx of, for example, these research tools that are AI assisted and so on. What are you seeing as, since it's our AI for UX and for product discovery, how are you seeing things evolving as you're talking to your customers about this?
Yeah, specifically about AI.
Yeah, I think how their
Yeah,
work is different because of
yeah,
everything that's out there now.
for sure. I mean, I think everyone's thinking about it, right? And I think kind of I always break up the research stack into these three layers. So the first layer is the tool used to conduct the research. I think you can actually kind of put them in any order, but let's say that, test tool layer. There's the insight layer, so like the insight repositories, and then there's the participant layer where we obviously play. On the testing tool layer, I'm seeing kind of two things. One is that I think the incumbents are all investing in AI, different auto summaries, different, transcription tools, type of heads, things like that, that I do think add value, but they're not AI native, right? Like they add some value. They're not,
Hmm.
a lot of SaaS tools are adding these kinds of features on them. Um, I think then you kind of have the AI moderated tools like the ones Outset and Herd and Listen Lab. I think there's more and more of those kind of coming out. It seems like every every month I'm hearing of a new one, raising money from good investors. None of them have really broken out yet, right? I think they're all at the early stages, or all trying to differentiate, but anecdotes I hear from the market are relatively positive on them. Like they seem to work. So that's kind of the testing tool layer of the stack. At the insight layer of the stack, I think this layer is, you really need to think about it AI from first principle. Like AI, it should be an AI native layer. And I think the incumbents in there, your Marvins, your Dovetails, are investing a lot in AI because of that, right? Because what this layer of the stack's doing is they're getting all of this qualitative data over time and making it easy to
Hmm.
summarize and pull back when you need to, which is kind of created for large language models, really, if you think about it. So I actually think a lot of the investments these kinds of companies have made over the past 5 years or 10 years, however long they've been around, um, have almost become less important now that AI is there. So it feels like a layer of the stack that, very AI heavy. Um, our layer of the stack, we've been making the decision, like I talked about earlier, for AI to power the recruitment, so be more behind the scenes, but
Hmm.
create better outcomes for the participant and for the researcher. And then there's also, I think, a couple startups that are doing something around like synthetic users. I think you've interviewed the CEO of one called Synthetic Users. Whereas like, the testing tool layer, they're using AI to replace the moderator. These companies are using AI to replace the participants. Um, I think from what I've seen, the market hasn't been extremely positive towards these yet, but we're monitoring it, and I think there's smart people working on this, but that hasn't really taken off yet, and I think there's some hesitancy around.
Hmm.
What we say at user interviews is, you can't do user research without humans, right? Like that's a major part of user research, but I do want to be respectful and see, I think a lot of technological change takes people by surprise. So, and there's smart, thoughtful people working on those as well.
Yeah, we have heard some folks talking about how, gosh, if I've got hundreds or thousands of interviews and survey points and so on, can I put those all together to represent the body of my clientele and essentially ask questions of that? So it is an interesting new possibility in very
Yeah,
early
what's interesting
stages.
there is like, when does
Mm.
that, is that the insight layer, or is that replacing the participants, right? Like, is that just,
Hmm.
yeah, I think they go into each other. And then maybe you have a question about the insights layer replacing, like, people are doing less research because they're able to reuse existing research more. I think that's like an interesting question. So I think, it's all moving very fast. There's
Hmm.
a lot of I think the user research kind of world is relatively, they're probably a little bit more hesitant than some other departments are about like jumping wholeheartedly into AI. I think they understand the risk of AI and the importance of making sure the insights they're generating and sharing with their stakeholders are accurate. So I think it's still, people are trying to feel it out, and there haven't been any real like AI breakaways or winners yet, but there's a lot of investment going in there, and and I think we'll continue to monitor and see the changes that happen over the next year and couple of years ahead.
Yeah,
Do you
certainly.
agree with that? Anything I said on I know you're the expert here, so does this line up
No,
with
no, no.
your?
I think it's very consistent, and I right for myself. I wrote a book called "Design for How People Think," so it wasn't designed for how synthetic users think. So, you do. There's a delicate balance there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you're also seeing like how big groups are and how much this notion of democratizing or other teams are starting to use your tools. So essentially, how do you see product discovery or product research sort of evolving over the next while?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what we've seen, this is my quick summary of what we've seen since we started user interviews, is there was, when we initially started, there was all of this kind of like single user researcher. Um, the first user researcher at a company. There was all this content around how do you, build the practice, how being a one user researcher, how do you show the value? We then saw like kind of teams grow, like larger user research teams. We then saw this big democratization push where PMs and designers were doing more research in addition to full-time user researchers. There's a bit of a response to that where it was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we need to make sure it's being done in a compliant way. We need to make
Mm-hmm.
sure we're supporting them with their research. Initially, I think that fell on the researchers, but then led to kind of research operations as a function growing. So that's kind of where I feel like the world was in 2022. And then I think over the past, at that point, we then kind of saw the market crash for tech companies
Mm-hmm.
and people really look at budget. So there was kind of a lot of focus on budget at the
Sure.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, more recently, we've seen kind of this wave of AI where, like I said, people are still kind of wrapping their arms around it. So that's kind of the progression I've seen. I think what we're going to see in the next, year or two is a really big focus on showing the ROI and the value of research, right? And how can we be cost effective? How can we make sure that we're showing impact from the research we're doing? Because there is just increased scrutiny across the whole company, not specifically on research, but just across the whole company. And I think user research is maybe a little bit of a younger profession, or at least a younger profession at the scale it is today. Um, doesn't quite have the history of showing that
Yeah.
ROI, even though I think we all believe there's impact in
Mm-hmm.
ROI. So I think that'll be a big, big focus going forward is kind of measuring the impact of research.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And yeah, increasingly we're doing more strategic work and not, should this be a drop down or not, but very
Yeah.
different, what's the business case for this, concept and the
Yeah.
scale and so on. So really cool. Well,
Mhm.
just to say it one last time, if folks want to give user interviews a try, can you just remind us how they can do that?
Yeah, just go on userinterviews.com and then you can just launch the project right away. Like as I mentioned, I have a pay-as-you-go model. There's no cost to launch the project, and you can actually see the participants we bring in and without paying anything. So if you just want to see, hey, are we able to find, if you don't,
Mm.
can they find the people we're looking for? You can do that for free. And then if you want to talk to them, they're there waiting for you.
Very nice. Well, thank you, Basil, for sharing user interviews with us and your vantage point. And I'll just wind us down. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and keeping up with the latest on AI for user research and discovery. Subscribe and if you want other tools, please let us know in the comments. And wishing you brilliant insights with AI.